We're diving into a sudden and really dramatic escalation in the Middle East. Tensions between the US and Iran have just about reached a boiling point, and we're going to break down how we got here so incredibly fast. So, just when it looked like a direct conflict might have been avoided, the whole situation has completely flipped on its head. Let's piece together the puzzle of this high-stakes military move, which it turns out all started with a sudden and pretty drastic change in strategy. And it all begins with this threat arriving on the scene. Barely 10 days after it seemed like everyone was stepping back from the brink, the US did a complete 180, dramatically raising the stakes in a region that's already, a tinderbox. Just look at this whiplash. On January 15th, the plans for an attack were reportedly a done deal. The very next day, they're called off. Then, boom, just over a week later, a massive military drill is announced, and a full carrier strike group is right there, in position. It's such a rapid reversal. So what on earth happened in those crucial 10 days? Well, here's the thing. The entire strategy was forced to change. The initial plan, which was to use American bases in allied Middle Eastern countries, well, it completely fell apart. Why? Because those allies got some serious cold feet. They were absolutely terrified of direct retaliation from Iran on their own soil. And this forced the Pentagon to pivot its entire approach, shifting away from these vulnerable sitting duck land bases to the mobile, self-sufficient, and frankly overwhelming power of the sea. So that's where this floating fortress comes in. The centerpiece of this brand new strategy is a single, immensely powerful weapon system, the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. To put this into perspective, at 333 meters, this warship is longer than 3 football fields. It is, quite literally, a floating piece of sovereign American territory. And it's not just big, it carries an entire air force on its deck. We're talking over 75 combat aircraft, including some of the most advanced jets in the world, all just floating off an adversary's coast. But here's the real kicker. Its most significant strategic advantage. It's nuclear-powered. That means it can operate for more than 2 decades without ever needing to refuel. It can project power anywhere in the world for as long as it needs to. But get this, what makes this carrier group so incredibly deadly isn't actually a fighter jet. It's this plane, the E-2 Hawkeye. You can think of it as the fleet's brain and its electronic shield, a reverse radar that flies high above all the action. This thing is a total game changer. It flies way up above the US fighters, scanning the ground for any enemy radar. The second it detects a hostile radar trying to lock on, it jams the signal, basically blinding them. But it doesn't stop there. It also pinpoints exactly where that radar came from and feeds the targeting data to US jets so they can take it out. It creates this electronic shield that lets planes like the F-35 operate almost like they're invisible. So as you can imagine, the arrival of this floating fortress wasn't just a military move. It was a diplomatic earthquake. It sent shockwaves across a region that is now completely on edge. You start to see a really clear pattern here. Iran's immediate neighbors are desperately trying to hit the brakes. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, they've all refused to let their territory be used for an attack. They are terrified of getting caught in the crossfire, fearing strikes on their critical oil, financial, and economic centers. They're basically all saying, not in our backyard. But there's one country that's singing a very, very different tune, signaling that it's more than ready for a confrontation. Israel's prime minister has said that any attack will be met with a response of unprecedented force, a really stark contrast to all the calls for de-escalation from its neighbors. All right, so let's zoom out for the final piece of this puzzle, because this isn't just about a single ship. It's about a much larger global chessboard where all the pieces are now snapping into place. And when you start connecting these dots, the big picture really comes into focus. That military drill? Many see it as a full-scale rehearsal. The island of Diego Garcia is being prepped as a backup plan. There's even talk of NATO's Article 5, the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all, which could pull in dozens of countries. And Iraq has been explicitly warned, stay out of it. This is a multifaceted plan designed to isolate Iran from every single angle. So, that leaves us with the big, sobering question. With all the military hardware in place, with regional allies on high alert, and global alliances now on notice, is there any off-ramp left? All the pieces are moving into position, leaving us all to wonder, will diplomacy fail, and is war now inevitable?